All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Sorry for a bit of a delay there. I was trying to work on some technical things on my side. Thank you for joining us for today's Mastering the OTA pitch. Today's session is designed to help members explore the art of crafting winning technical and business narratives that resonate with managers and evaluators. So if you have not already done so, please go ahead and get rid of all of the extra things. Limit some of those distractions. The whole purpose of this is to benefit maximizing the information and answer any questions you might have. So make sure that if you can see the Q&A, add in your questions in the Q&A section. If you want to use the chat, you should be able to do that as well. Hopefully you can see and hear both of us. We are recording this, so I will send the replay over to the email with which you registered after the event. And if you have questions afterwards, you are welcome to ask them in that email as well if something comes in on that side. So I am excited because you're in for a very big treat today. I'm going to allow each of our panelists to give a brief introduction of who they are and what it is that they do. So, John, if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do with ATI?
Sure, Meg. Yeah, I'm John Carney. So I worked for the Department of Navy as a civilian employee for 30 years. The first 8 of those, I was at NSWC Carter Rock doing um, projects, both project managing and also running technical projects and executing them. And then from there, I went to Office of Naval Research for 22 years. And most of that time, I was the Navy Manufacturing Technology Program Manager. And so I had full responsibility from budgeting, executing contracts to run those things. And ATI was one of the performers underneath that program. And so I've got a lot of experience having ATI helping me. So now I'm on the other side of the fence. I retired from the government in 2020 and took some time off. And now I'm back as a senior advisor with ATI, helping them with some of the technology development things that they're doing. And so I'm glad to be here today. Um, I will be answering mostly the questions on technical side of how proposals are evaluated. And then Kevin can introduce himself next. He's got the experience on the OT side, and he can answer those kinds of questions for you. So with that, Kevin, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Pate. I'm a director of OTA program manager here at ATI. I've been program manager for various consortia-based OTA programs that have many prototype projects under them. So I've helped to set up new programs and establish their processes, worked with various government customers for those types of OTA programs. So well versed in the operations side of OTAs from the consortium manager perspective.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. Today, we are going to go over just a couple of things. We're going to go over OTA pipeline, knowing your audience, plain language that's going to work, your differentiators, some common proposal killers, and then some time for Q&A. So here, I'm going to turn it over to John and Kevin. Make sure if you have any questions to place them into the Q&A tab or the chat box, and I will keep an eye on those throughout and compile so that we can answer toward the end. John, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Meg. Yes, we're going to start with the OTA pipeline. Just for process today, we are not going to have a full hour worth of slides, so there will be time at the end to go through any questions that you have. So you can save those. Like I said, Kevin can help out with details on how the OT piece of it works and the consortium manager piece, and I can help out with details on the valuation side and what that looks like from that side of the fence. But we just want to start out by kind of explaining how this pipeline works from the other side. You guys are on the proposer side and we're on the evaluator side, and just explaining that context for you. So next slide. So these are really the steps that you're going to see. Most companies that are on this webinar, I think, are pursuing work through a consortium OTA. And so this is really the total pipeline that you're going to walk through. Gate number one is the consortium manager. So that is not just a mailbox, but they actively screen for member standing, eligibility to bid, package completeness, and those types of things before they send that package to the government for further review and selection. And if any compliance errors are found, hopefully they will give you an opportunity to quickly fix those, and then keep your proposal in the mix when it goes for tech evaluation with the government. But main point about all of this is that once your proposal gets through the consortium manager screening and gets to the government technical reviewers, which is really in stage 3, then that process looks the same whether you submitted a proposal directly to the government, because some of you may be bidding on other work that's direct to government. And these steps would be identical from 3 and 4, or at least 3 and then the front end of 4. Um, and so it's still useful information for you, no matter if you're bidding through a consortium or through directly to the government. The OT vehicle changes the contracting mechanism on the back end, but it doesn't change the technical evaluation process. Next slide. So as a program manager for the Department of the Navy, I've read thousands of proposals over the years. And one thing that bidders often don't realize is that most of the program managers are fairly risk averse. And so you don't really need to come in with the flashiest technology. That's not necessarily what they're looking for. It really depends on the audience. But often they're looking for a proposal that gives them the most confidence that you can execute and you can deliver what you're saying that you're going to deliver. Do you understand the problem? Do you show that you can execute what you're proposing? And also confidence that if they fund you, they won't be explaining failure to their leadership, 6 months into the project. So everything that you write, you really want to be addressing this program manager, really trying to give them confidence, reduce their perception of risk, and don't just describe the technology and think that, well, my technology is so impressive that will carry the day for me. You've got to understand their point of view in a more complete fashion, not just, hey, this technology is really cool, and if it works, it'll be a huge benefit to the warfighter, which obviously is part of the calculus, but that's not the complete story. And then the next thing, and I'll talk about this a minute in the next slide, is that the PM often is the final decision authority. So sometimes it goes a level above that, but normally the PM will be the technical decision authority and also the acquisition decision authority for, small to moderate sized acquisitions that you're probably looking at, like things that are going through a consortium manager. Next slide. So again, with an OT consortium, the proposal is going to go through 5 different layers, potentially, not 4. And the consortium manager, again, is the layer 0. That's the first gate that you have to get through before the government decision makers can take a look at what you proposed. And the CM screening role is supportive, really. It's trying to catch compliance errors, format errors, any technical glitches that might be causing a problem, and then try to give a submitter an opportunity to correct those issues first. So this isn't a screening to artificially rule people out. It's a screening to help try to rule you in and try to get you to the next level, so that the government people can see all the proposals and make a decision based on the content thereof, not artificially exclude people for minor compliance kinds of issues. That's not the intention. So they can definitely help on the CM side with some of those things. But once it gets through that first phase, again, it's going to get into the same kind of review with the government that it would get through if you submitted directly to the government. And just like any other evaluation, the technical evaluators are going to try to score technical merit. And then in parallel to that, really, these are shown sort of sequentially, but the technical and the contracting and legal can go in parallel. And contracts guys and legal guys are looking at terms and conditions, the IP, they're doing a stronger scrub on the cost proposal and making sure that that's in compliance and those kind of things. So the program manager is looking for mission fit. And then after that, it doesn't usually happen for smaller programs. But for larger programs, it can go to that next bottom layer, the leadership and decision authority. Again, decision authority may be the program manager, but if it's a major acquisition, it's going to be a level above that. And so you have to make sure the proposal addresses what the leadership is looking for as well. And you really, again, write the proposal to address all 5 of these layers, not just a single layer. Next slide, please. So before we get into some of the details on the specific audiences in terms of the technical evaluators and then the program manager that I've been discussing, I just wanted to take a step back and give you some context here. All this is really trying to help you see the view from the other side. What is the government looking for? And trying to help you to figure out how to explain to them that you understand their world and that you don't just understand the technology, but you understand how to get the technology to them. And that's really what the key is. If you have great technology, but you don't understand the requirements to get the technology to them, then the proposal is not going to be compelling. But a big thing is just understanding the actual organization that you're proposing to. If you get a request for research from somebody like the Office of Naval Research or DARPA using 6.1 through 6.3 S&T, this is basic research, applied research, and advanced technology development funding. They're really looking for highly novel solutions, and they're looking for enough technical risk to justify using S&T money. When I was at ONR, every single funding action went through a review panel, and they'd look at it and they would say, is this S&T? And they would really want to know that you're spending it on the right thing. And also as a program manager, you have to justify back to Congress and back to the approval chain within the Navy that, what you're doing with those program dollars meets the mission requirements and the things that are in your budget exhibits, the R2s and those things, and that you're executing in accordance with that mission, and you're executing in accordance with the budget language that you get from Congress every year, along with the money. So all those things have to be lined up. And so you as a bidder need to understand the constraints that surround the different programs and kind of what they're looking for. ONR now is taking it even a little bit further. The Chief of Naval Research now looks not only is it S&T, but she really wants to see also, is this so Navy unique that nobody else is going to fund this S&T, that we as the Navy S&T command are the only ones that are going to fund this. So if it's an important requirement for Navy, it's not getting done if we don't do it. On the DARPA side, you probably heard the term DARPA hard. They're looking for things that are very difficult, that are really a heavy lift to get done. And I'm not sure if they still look at it this way, but the leadership there used to say, if the first impression of a proposal is not, hey, this is impossible, then they don't think it's taken on enough risk to be DARPA hard. So that's sort of one end of the spectrum. And then if you get into a lot of the consortiums are run out of warfare centers, so you're getting into things that are a little more tactical, trying to figure out how to tailor technology to meet a specific need. It's not quite as much of inventing technology, so there's not as much technical risk there. And so you need to understand how to explain to those people. And the same thing if you're doing something for an acquisition program, that they want technology that's a lot closer and that they can see, like at the end of your proposal, that you have something that they could use. It's not just, hey, in 6.1 we had a concept and we developed it and now we're ready to transition it to 6.2. I mean, that's more of an ONR's kind of thing, but not something that the Warfare Center or Systems Command or acquisition program is going to want to see. Next slide, please. So again, the two main audiences that you have to deal with are the technical evaluators. These guys want to see the math. They want to know what your TRL is at the beginning. Where do you think you're going to be at the end of the work? They want to see your prior test results. What is your methodology? They really want to see the details, and they will check your references. They'll look into what you're telling them, and they'll know if you're bluffing. So don't try to impress them with jargon. Just impress them with your technical rigor. That's what they want to see, and that's really the world they live in. The other side, the PM, they're looking for something different. They want to know if this fits the actual need that they're trying to solve with the solicitation. They want to know if your company can deliver the result. And they also want to understand what their story is to their leadership about why they're funding it. They want to be able to tell that story cleanly and have a good message that is easy to tell. It's not overly complicated about why this is the right solution for the problem. So if you already write a great proposal, you need to address both these audiences. You can't pick one or the other because they're both going to be gatekeepers for you. The executive summary at the beginning of the proposal should really focus on the decision maker on the mission side, and the technical side should talk to the engineers. So you need to split your approach in your writing and have multiple voices to deal with multiple customers of your proposal product. Next slide. So one of the best things you can do when you get a solicitation is just read it very carefully. And you read it more like an investigator and not as if it's a checklist. When I was writing RFPs for ONR, I would put the important priorities first in the evaluation criteria. Also in the technical criteria within the proposal. And most bidders, they'll look at those things and treat them as equally weighted. And sometimes they were in the proposal, the RFP may say they're equally weighted, but often the weights are explicitly defined. But even if they're not, the things that are stated first are usually what's on the top of the mind of the writer. So keep that in mind. Also, mind it for phrasing that's in there and try to reflect that phrasing back in your proposal. If I use the phrase rapid transition to the fleet 3 times in a solicitation and your proposal never mentions that, then that's going to be a red flag and you're probably not going to get through that screening. The solicitation is clearly important, and you need to read it and try to mine out the clues that the PM gives you in there. It's not written to kind of hide what they're trying to do, but just like your proposal, they're limited in how much they can write in there, and so it may not come out and be super explicit on everything that they're looking for. But just take their words, mirror them back, and also as you write the proposal, you need to look at the evaluation criteria, because when that goes to the tech reviewers, they're going to get a format that says, okay, here's what technically is required of this proposal. Here are the questions that the proposal is supposed to answer. And then they've got to go read the proposal and mine out the answers to that. So the more you can align your proposal to those technical requirements, then the easier it is for them to go and see, oh, here's where this company is addressing question 1. Let me see what they say. Let me see if I agree with it and see if I can use that in my write-up. But if they've got to go and find that from 10 different places and try to piece it all together, then you're making their job a lot harder. And if it gets too hard, then you're not gonna fare too well in the evaluation. So definitely keep that in mind as you look at the evaluation piece of it and evaluation factors. Next slide, please. The other thing that's important is to understand who your gatekeepers are. So for an OTA consortium, you have more gatekeepers, like I said before, than you do if you're directly bidding to the government. But the CM role in Gate 0 is not passive. They are screening for things like membership standing, general eligibility, cybersecurity certifications, and all those kinds of things. Format compliance with what the solicitation said, and just completeness overall of the proposal. Does it have all the things that the government's going to need to review it? So you need to make sure that you are fixing anything that would keep you from getting through this gate before you do anything else. When you're looking at compliance, confirm your membership is current. If you've got access to the submission portal, then you're probably good there. Read the solicitation closely and make sure to get the proposal in on time. Once you get through there, a lot of people don't understand. They think, well, I'm just proposing this to whoever the program manager is, and if I understand their world, then that is sufficient. But oftentimes, if you're trying to really get this into the government, get it into the Navy, for example, the program manager is not the only gatekeeper. So you may be selling the program manager, so you might be able to sell your product straight to them, and they buy it from you, and then they use it directly. But often that's not the case. A lot of times you've got like the Gate B box there, where they're trying to develop some technology that's going to be a subsystem to a prime contractor. And so if that's the case, your proposal, you don't have to necessarily have all the details worked out on how to do that, but you need to not acknowledge that, yeah, this is how my piece of the puzzle fits into this bigger system, and explain that you understand who the prime is and how to work with them and those kind of things. Because if you propose it as if you're just going to sell it to the government, then you're assuming the government's going to go and get through all the wickets required to work with the prime and put that into place. And that's usually not going to be the case. And then for Gate C, if the government's doing the integration, it's kind of the same thing as Gate B. You need to understand how that's going to work within the government, and then how your puzzle piece fits into that world, and that you understand the standards and things that are going to be required to make sure the interfaces work and all those kind of things. So just really understanding the potential for where this technology is going to land, where it's going to be implemented, and how the customer is going to be able to buy it. Because again, the program manager, while they're writing the RFP for your particular proposal, they don't necessarily have the ability to buy the end product and get it out and get it fielded. Next slide, please. So this is a similar thing, the technical authority. Within the Navy, the systems commands often had technical authority, so they would have the technical warrant holders for a particular product. And then the acquisition people will be different from that. So if you're writing a proposal that's going to go to an acquisition person, you need to recognize in that proposal that there are going to be testing requirements, that there's going to be things that the technical authority wants to see. And depending on how the RFP is written, you may or may not need to bid those as, costed elements of your proposal, but you need to at least acknowledge that, hey, we understand what the pipeline looks like to get this from where we are today in development to you, the program manager, having approval to put that onto your platform. Because if you don't understand that, then the program manager is not going to have that confidence that I talked about earlier, as far as that you can get to the end and make it into the final product that he can buy. Because the program manager, and some of this is being changed now, so you have to be kind of careful with the PAE, the portfolio acquisition executive structure, and the syscoms are kind of being changed. And one of the reasons for doing that is try to change this alignment. So some of those technical authorities are being moved to the portfolio acquisition office, and so that will give the acquisition people a little more control over the technical authorities in places, but not all of it's going that way. But it's certainly, it's a very important aspect to realize. And if there's ambiguity there, I mean, don't overstate that you understand it if it's not clear how it's going to work, because government people, it's not clear on their side right now in a lot of these cases. So you won't offend them by saying, hey, we'll work with the authorities, wherever they reside, and not being super specific on that, but just recognize that this is as a requirement, and is something that some of your competitors maybe won't understand, and it'll give you a leg up. Next slide, please. All right, next, just some specifics on actually writing the proposal. Sometimes you're going to get some pushback from the engineers that think this is dumbing things down, but I'm not advocating to dumb things down, but it's just to make things clear and make it easier for the government readers to understand what you're writing. And that's really what this is about. Next slide, please. And one more. Okay, so start out by reading the before sentence, and then I'll continue on once you have a second to do that. And you can see it's kind of complicated. It goes through a lot of different things. And the question you need to ask yourself is, could a two-star admiral read that and immediately understand what you do? Probably not. And I've seen that kind of sentence. It's the kind of stuff engineers like to write. It's overly complicated. And the author in this case thought it sounded impressive, but the evaluator probably didn't understand it and probably couldn't explain it to the next person they talked to. And so the after version is a lot clearer, it's a lot simpler, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to convey to the next line, that chain of command. So really what I'm getting at here for a rule of thumb is that if your executive summary paragraph at the beginning can't be paraphrased in a budget briefing by a non-engineer, then rewrite it. So keep that part of it simple. You can get into more of the details, later on in your proposal. But you need to have your core message up front, something that is not overly complicated and that explains the benefits in a way that's concise and doesn't unnecessarily add jargon that the non-engineers are not going to maybe understand and certainly not want to repeat in a room where somebody might ask some questions about it that they can't explain. So anyway, just try to keep things clear and simple and easy for somebody that isn't working at the level of detail that you are to understand. Okay, next slide, please. So then building on that point, here are some rules just to give you some ideas on how to keep the language plain. These come directly from patterns that I saw in successful versus unsuccessful proposals during my career working for the Navy. So rule number one is the most powerful here. You open up with your company's history or a general technology background, you've already lost a reviewer. You want to open up with a problem, show the reviewer that you understand their pain point. You're not really trying to show them that your technology is the best at this point. You're trying to say, hey, we get where you're trying to go and the problem that you on the reviewer side are trying to solve. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And then after you've done that, then introduce your solution as the answer to that problem. But you've kind of framed it in a way that you understand the problem, you understand the pain that the person that drafted the RFP is feeling, and then you convince them that your answer is the best. I won't read all these to you, but then rule 5, you might think this is counterintuitive, but it works because it forces every section to be responsive to the solicitation. If you make the header a question, then your content sort of has to answer it. And then, like I mentioned earlier, that keeps the evaluators from trying to hunt down where the answers are as they're trying to fill out their evaluation form. It puts it right in front of them, hopefully, and then they can decide whether they agree with it. And if they do, then it's easy for them to add that into their review, hopefully in a way that's favorable to you since you explained it clearly to them. Okay, next slide, please. So next I'm going to talk about differentiators. I think everyone that writes a proposal thinks they put differentiators in. So I just want to talk about what makes these things work, what makes evaluators take notice. And often proposals, small businesses and other bidders have differentiators that are not as different as they think. And so I want to go through some examples of these and give you some help on how to build your proposal differentiators in a way that'll resonate with the reviewers. All right, next slide, please. So here I've got in red some very generic things that people write and think they're differentiators. And then in green, a rewrite of that same concept in a way that will actually get attention and it will differentiate your proposal. Another way to look at this is any other bidder test. So if you read the differentiator sentence and then you ask, could anybody competing on this solicitation say the exact same words? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's not a differentiator because everybody kind of looks the same. Every one of these red sentences was in proposals I reviewed, and they're not going to hurt your proposal, but they're also not going to help you. And so you shouldn't spend time. They essentially are noise within your proposal. They're not doing the work that you need them to do. And the evaluators aren't going to pay much attention to these because, again, if they're sitting here trying to write an evaluation and saying, okay, what's the technical strength of this proposed technology? Oh, our technology is innovative and superior. Well, that doesn't give them anything to work with. They can't just mimic that back because there's nothing there for them to go off of that helps put any depth into their proposal evaluation, which is what's required. So green sentences are a lot stronger. They give the evaluator facts that they can actually put in their evaluation, and that's where you're trying to get to. These are things that the evaluators can just copy and put right into their scoring section and say, I'm giving it this score and here's why. They showed us that they can do these things, where they've got the track record, they've got the plan moving forward to make these things happen. So that's what I'm trying to get on differentiators. Next slide, I'll show you a little more detail on how to build these. So every differentiator statement needs to have 3 components. The first one is a capability. And so, for example, you don't want to put in here, we're using advanced AI, but you'd rather say we have a neural net trained on 50,000 hours of real world sonar data. That would be a specific capability. Second, provide the evidence, not our team's experience, but we validated this at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport. And third, what's the mission relevance? Connect the dots to the evaluator. Don't make them infer why it matters. Tell them. So when you put all 3 of these together, then you have a sentence that the evaluator can score, they can quote, and they can defend in their evaluation. So I think after this webinar is over, you might want to take a look at this slide and look at some of your own proposal differentiator statements and see how you did. I mean, a lot of times people have two of these, they're missing a third. And so as you're pulling together your examples and your differentiator statements in the future, try to think about all three of these things. Next slide, please. So this is the last section, and then we can get to your guys' questions. So just bear with me here a few more minutes. So this is just some common proposal killers and some things you can do to try to avoid these. Next slide. I won't read all these to you. They're all pretty simple things, but we all know that everyone's busy. There's a lot going on with everyone that's trying to write a proposal. Everyone's trying to get it submitted. And it's easy to think that someone else in your organization took care of something like SAM registration or keeping the consortium membership current, but there needs to be accountability across all the requirements of the proposal and somebody that's making sure that all the things are met. And so these are some of the things that, again, look simple, but are easy to miss. And next slide. One of the ways to avoid having these things happen is to have a proposal checklist. And what you want to do is just formalize all the requirements in one place so that before you submit the proposal, you can check against that. And oftentimes for more complicated solicitations, you'll have to update your checklist because there'll be guidance changes throughout the solicitation process. You could have an industry day that provides more input. You might have questions and answers to come back and change the solicitation. So you can't just use the original solicitation to build your checklist. You need to be flexible and have somebody that's paying attention to the entire process that's keeping that up for you. And then when you get to the end, you can be confident everything is done, all the requirements have been met, and then you can submit your proposal to the CM or to the government, whichever the case may be. So with that, we can go to the next slide and take questions.
Perfect. This, like we said, or like John said, this is where we can open it up to any questions that you might have. I know that Kevin, I think, is answering a question right now in the Q&A. He's been very helpful and kind of, peeking in back there. But a couple things to remember and some key resources to continue on your journey. If you, like I said, if you have questions, throw them in there now, stick them in the chat. Happy to go through and answer any of those. If there are questions that you find you have after we finish the webinar and you would like to get those answered, you're welcome to respond on the email I sent over that has the replay on it. So just in case you're, trying to find the question real quick, don't worry. We can answer after the fact as well. But a couple key resources to remember: sam.gov to make sure your registration is current. That's super important. Make sure you're utilizing sbir.gov to the database that has CIVR and STTR opportunities. Check in on any grants for civilian agency and non-dilutive funding opportunities. And last but not least, near and dear to my heart, I'm a little bit biased here. Make sure you keep your govmates profile updated so that you have access to matchmaking opportunities, any education, networking, events, all that kind of stuff. We do have a networking coming up on September 30th in the Tysons, Virginia area, so Northern Virginia. If you are in the area and would like to join us for that, it's for GovCon members only, so that's one of those things that you can do as well. I do know that we had a quick question, and I hope it's okay, Kevin. I really liked your answer, so I'm going to share it because I don't think that everybody got a chance to see it. So the question we had was, we can talk to the PMs before the due date, but can we trust that the guidance that they might give us on what they want is actually going to be what the technical evaluators want to see? Which I think is a good question because, we can do all the talking, have all the conversations, but what's actually going to be in, that thing that when it comes out or whatever. Kevin said, Kevin, do you want me to read this out or do you want to answer
Sure,
it?
go ahead.
Okay, cool. You wrote it very well, so I wanted to know if you wanted it in your words. He says that OTAs allow great flexibility in government industry communication through the process. So typically the only communication blackout period is during the evaluations between the solicitation due date and the final selection approval. So that's a great, you made a great observation of how you should be aware of who you're talking to. At an industry day, for example, maybe you get to talk to a technical point of contact and the PM. The technical point of contact is going to be more involved in the actual evaluations. For example, identifying identifying and writing to the solution's strengths and weaknesses and risks. And as John explained, the government PM will be involved at a higher level. So reading the technical point of context evaluations and making funding decisions. So Kevin's advice would be to trust the guidance that you get, but recognize where it's coming from. And don't forget about the other levels that John has noted. So contracting office, legal, decision authority, things like that. Is there anything on there, Kevin, that you wanted me to make sure that I put a pin in separate?
If so I can add a little bit more. Every
Great.
program is going to be different. Every OTA kind of process is going to be different. Sometimes there's more formalized opportunity for Q&A, whether that's submitting questions or a virtual kind of industry day event about, one specific topic, or maybe it's like an annual industry day event. There are a lot of different opportunities, and sometimes those questions will go through the contracting office or the government office, and then they'll make a decision whether they're going to respond or not. They don't have to, or whether they respond just to you or they'll respond to everyone, right? Maybe your question identifies something that everybody needs to know so that they get good solutions, right? So there's just so much kind of flexibility in there. So I found it hard to kind of standardize the Q&A process, but underlying all of that, that's a really good point to make sure you understand that feedback that you're getting. Where is that actually coming from? That's probably not, coming from the actual, acquisition officer or the contracting officer who's going to be a part of that. So keep them in mind too.
I think one of the biggest things that we always hear when we do webinars and education pieces and things like that is that a lot of the answers to the questions we're asking are it depends. And it tends to depend on, what they're asking for, who you're talking to, timing, what are possible. So there's a lot of the it depends, which is not my favorite answer because it just happens to feel like a non-answer sometimes, but that is the answer in government contracting a lot of the time. So when you hear that, know that it's not because somebody doesn't want to give you an answer. It's just because there are so many things that are so specific, depending on, each solicitation, each question, each proposal, all of those things, they, do have their own nuances, which is why we don't typically recommend a copy paste situation when you're going into anything new. One of the other questions that came up, and Kevin, I'm going to let you answer this one again, because again, you did a great job here. It talked about, we talked on slide 19 about some of the differentiators and things like that. And it says it assumes that the proposer has moved past their first grant. So some of the suggestions there were like, hey, you've already done some federal work. This is how you can, adjust. Somebody said, I'm trying to get my first grant, so none of what is on that slide would actually work for me yet because I don't have federal past performance. Could you suggest some alternatives? So Kevin, what did you tell them?
Yeah, so that's a great catch. I mean, all the examples that we use there, could you go back to slide 19? All the
Sure.
examples used there reference prior, government work, assuming you've done something that's, super relevant to a specific project. I'd actually like John's kind of feedback on this. How do you throw in a differentiator if you don't have that specific relevant work to that customer yet?
Well, I think you just have to make the case the best you can. And so what evidence do you have about your technology? What can you explain about demonstrations you've done or anything that you have? Because if it is a brand new and novel technology, that's a super valid point that you haven't gotten that government track record yet. And I mean, a lot of what ATI does is try to bring in people just like this and try to get new players into the arena and help them bring their technology to the government, because sometimes the old solutions are not what's needed. And so, but again, you probably just need to build on these same kinds of points that were on the next slide of like, how do I tell that story in a slightly different way of I've demonstrated it and maybe it's only been in a lab environment, but here's what I demonstrated and here's what the benefit of that would be. It might not be mission relevance, but make the best case you can that it's not just vaporware. We don't want to have you come in and say, well, I'm a really smart guy and trust me, it works. That's not going to get you too far. So tell us the best story you can, and then go from there. I think too, for brand new technology people, I mean, you got to kind of understand the environment. And so if you do a bit of homework on who you're bidding to, that you can make it more relevant to them instead of just trying to explain your technology without spending the time. It's not an easy environment to work in. And you got to realize your competitors do understand the environment. And a lot of them have spent a lot of time. They've got board members that have, very relevant experience that can tell them how to go do these things. And so sometimes going to these industry days, going to other places, to other meetings that are open. Some of the things that Meg's talking about that they're running to try to help you along that way. I mean, you're gonna have to put some work in and do that work, and it'll show up in your proposal if you do. And I think the evaluators will realize that not everybody is going to be somebody we've worked with in the past. But you also can help yourself by trying to look credible. I mean, we had a recent call that we did, and some of the things come in from, it's a university person and it comes in with their apartment, apartment C of whatever. And it's like, this doesn't look very professional. It looks like, you're just sitting there on your computer and you use AI to write this thing up, and there's probably no there to it, right? And so um, doing something to make your company look legitimate and look like it's really in business to do work. It's not just, I had a few minutes between classes and I wrote this proposal, kind of a thing. It all matters. And so you might not be able to check every box that we went through today, but just show that you're professional and show that you're competent. That's what you start with, and then you build from there.
Perfect. We had another one that come in that says, is there a process for socializing a technology solution so it forms the basis for a topic or an RFP?
Most consortia that I've been a part of will have some sort of process for that. Maybe it's a broad announcement where they say, hey, relative to this kind of technology area, give us all your ideas. And then that might turn it, or they might have an RFP saying, hey, we're looking for solutions to this problem statement. We don't have really an idea of how to solve that yet. And then eventually that'll turn into an RFP. There's also, of course, the industry days, technology exchanges, events, and other kind of relevant events where you might be able to find the right people to talk to.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
on that front, I mean, the big opportunity there, and we try to encourage this, is to get the person writing the requirement to write the requirement, right? Don't write the solution, just what's the need, and then you as the technology provider can come in and explain that. I had one year I wrote a SBIR package, and in those days it's probably the same way. It had to go over to the Office of Secretary of Defense, and then they got to sign off on the Navy's SBIR topics. I'm not sure why that was. It was all Navy money, but they got to sign off on it. And they sent it back and they said, this isn't innovative enough. And it's like, it's a statement of a problem. It's not positively or negatively innovative. I'm trying to find innovation in the solution. Why don't you guys get this? And it's just like super frustrating. So that's sort of the point of view, is that we want the innovation in the solution. And so you as a provider, you may have to go back to the person that wrote the solicitation and say, hey, could you open this up a little bit more? If you don't prescribe a solution, then I can come up with something that's going to help you more than if you kind of have it locked down the way it's written now. So it's kind of a contact sport in that vein, but that's the way that we look at it.
Also another way to get your kind of capabilities out there that I think is underutilized is go directly through your consortium manager, right? Because they work with the government customer all the time. They know who to talk to get your idea kind of socialized. And that can be a path to get it up the chain. The government customers are always looking for ideas, right?
And
So
Kevin, is that what a reverse industry day would do?
yeah, that's another great example. Yeah, reverse industry day or pitch opportunities. Sometimes there's a pitch challenge kind of thing. Tech Connect runs some great events that and they do a lot of those.
If I'm not mistaken, I think there's a Tech Connect event in November. So make sure if you are, on ATI website, check into that and take a look. I know you mentioned industry days and things like that. I know a lot of the consortia have their own specific industry days where they also run matchmaking. So those become
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity as well. So make sure you're like, whatever consortia you're involved with, you're paying attention to the emails that come out, right? Like don't be like, oh, it's another newsletter. Like some of that stuff is really important and has stuff that, gives you an opportunity to take a look and be involved. Also, the ATI app, it's called Collaboration. And it has an opportunity for you to kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of the things that are out already, or you're seeing, what's being put out there. So if you have a chance to take a look at that, it's a good resource as well. Like I said, it's called Collaboration. So if you don't have the access to that one, and as a note, if you are newer here to the ATI world and you're like, I'm not even part of a consortium yet, and you're not sure exactly, because we did have a question about that earlier. They were like, I have, these technologies. What consortia is best for me? There's a variety, and there could be more than one that works for you. If that's something you want to talk over, we at GovMates are happy to have that conversation with you and then put you in touch with, the correct individuals over at ATI that can help you get in and get settled and put things in the right space. So know that that's an option as well. The email for that is ati@govmates.com, and that'll get you over to us and we'll kind of, schedule something for you. So wanted to make sure that we gave that as an option as well. Any other questions, throw them in here. We'll see if we can get to them. John, Kevin, anything that you guys wanted to make sure that you double down on? If there's one thing that you want them to take away from today's chat, what would that be?
I actually just had another thought about the differentiator, if I could.
Please.
So looking at this kind of long term, right? John and I've been doing this for long enough to see at the end of a successful project, the government likes something they might call it a success story, but something where they can say there's a measurable return on investment in this project. Look how innovative it was, right? So when you can say we saved 50% of the man hours from the original process to our new process or our solution, save this much time in developing, whatever capability, or save this much money. Go ahead and do that in your proposal and say, we're estimating, this is the current way you're doing it. Our solution is going to save this much, even if it's just an estimate, right? They need that estimate as a starting point to kind of justify the project anyway. So do that work for them ahead of time, and then set yourself up for getting that idea of a success story at the end of it. Something for them to chase and make it more appealing.
Whatever you can do to help them make it an easy yes, right?
Right.
No, I think it's a great point. It kind of gets at the so what, if we did this, then so what? What's the benefit? And making that clear. And then you might get that risk averse program manager to take a little more risk if they're like, well, this is kind of a heavy lift, but if we pull it off, it's going to be a huge breakthrough or something like that. It's going to help the warfighter. It's going to change how the platform operates. Then they'll take that risk on, But if it's like, and we see this sometimes, this technology is fairly incremental. We know we can pull it off, but if we do, who really cares? I can't get anybody's interest in it because it was such an incremental change that, is it worth doing? Yeah, it might be worth doing, but is it going to get prioritized for funding? Probably not, because we're looking for things that are going to move the needle more than that, right?
Makes sense. So I'm going to advance slides back here again. Like we said, make sure you keep these keywords resources in your purview as you're kind of going through. As we said, we have recorded this, so I will send out the replay as well as a PDF of the slides so you can have access to those. After this event, once it processes, it'll come to the email address that you registered with on Zoom. So you'll get an email from myself. If you end up having additional questions that come up once you've kind of thought about this for a little while, happy to answer those as well. We'll direct you to the right place if you just pop an email over into our inbox. So thank you all for attending. Kevin and John, thank you for being our knowledgeable experts today and sharing this information with us. And make sure that you connect with everybody on LinkedIn if you would like to stay in touch. I know GovMates is very active over on there, as well as ATI. It's where you can find a lot of opportunities, a lot of things coming up, announcements of where they're going to be, attendance for different conferences, and places to find them. So if you want to stay in touch, that's a really great way to do it. And finally, check out any of the existing consortia over at the ati.org website. That'll give you all the information you need. There's even a place where you can go in and type in your capabilities, and it'll kind of show you which consortia will match as well. So other than that, thank you all, and we will see you next month for our next webinar. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Meg.